Soul of the Age: A Biography of the Mind of William Shakespeare by Jonathan Bate. For Harry, if not England and St. George. Shakespeare is the only biographer of Shakespeare. Every true man is a cause, a country, and an age. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Shakespeare and Self-Reliance. Hide thy life. Epicurus, quoted by Michel de Montaigne of Glory. Introduction. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. Then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon. With spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. He was not of an age, but for all time. So wrote Ben Jonson in the poem of praise published in the first folio of collected plays by his friend and rival, William Shakespeare. My earlier book, The Genius of Shakespeare, took that claim seriously and suggested that what we mean by Shakespeare is not just a life that lasted from 1564 to 1616. We also mean a body of words, characters, ideas, and stage images that have remained alive for 4 centuries because of their endless capacity for renewal and adaptation through the work of succeeding generations of actors and spectators, appreciative readers, and creative artists in every conceivable medium. In the same poem, Jonson also describes Shakespeare as soul of the age. In this book, I turn to that claim, taking it equally seriously. The Elizabethans regarded the soul as the principle of life. Through his works, Shakespeare gives life to his age. In trying to imagine what Jonson meant by his claim, we need to ask both, what was it like being Shakespeare? And what are the most telling ways in which Shakespeare's works embody, or rather ensoul, the world picture of his age? We have to shuttle back and forth between the Shakespearean mind and what has been usefully called the Shakespearean moment. Shakespeare's uniqueness must be held in balance with his typicality. Both not of an age and soul of the age. For Ralph Waldo Emerson, writing in 19th century New England, Shakespeare was inconceivably wise, possessed of a brain so uniquely vast that no one can penetrate it. But at the same time, he was the incarnation of a cause, a country, and an age. It is this double quality that makes Shakespeare, in Emerson's fine phrase, the representative poet. The soul was considered to be the seat of both thought and feeling. Through his characters and dramatic situations, Shakespeare not only represented the essentials of what it is to be human, he also gave immediate emotional life to the ideas of his age. My aim is to track him in that process, to observe the interplay of his mind and his world. The book is intended as an intellectual biography of the man in the context of the mindset into which he was born and out of which his works were created. In giving structure to the task, I have followed his own example and divided the life into 7 ages. I like to think that Shakespeare would have adopted a similar procedure if he had been commissioned to write his own biography. Each of the 7 ages invites us to consider a cultural moment and a broad theme: survival and environment for the infant, book learning for the schoolboy, the nature of sexual desire for the lover, war and social unrest for the soldier, law and politics for the justice, wisdom and folly for the old man, the art of facing death for the age of oblivion. What the approach cannot offer is an exact mapping whereby we see the bard in swaddling clothes in the first age and in a particular lover's bed in the third. We do not have the evidence for such fancies, and even if we did, they would not take us very far into the mind of Shakespeare. There is, though, a unifying image, that of the player. Each of humankind's ages, says Jacques in his famous speech in As You Like It, is a part, a dramatic role. That we are all actors is, of course, Shakespeare's leading metaphor throughout his career. That he was himself an actor as well as a playmaker is what sets him apart from his greatest theatrical contemporary, Christopher Marlowe. As we follow the tracks that led from rural Stratford-upon-Avon to urban London and back again, Shakespeare's life feels cyclical, not sequential. The influence of our early childhood stays with us all our lives and becomes peculiarly vivid when we see the prospect of grandchildren. So it is that The Infant begins in 1564, but alights in 1607-08. The influence of our schooling is equally enduring. Thus, The Schoolboy begins in King Edward's Grammar School in Stratford, but moves on to sustained discussion of Shakespeare's most complicated schoolmaster, Prospero, in his final solo-authored play, The Tempest. For Prospero, time is a dark backward and abysm. For Hamlet, the process of looking before and after defines the large discourse, the power of reason and speech that makes man something more than a beast. Shakespeare licenses us to loop backward and forward through his life as we try to read his mind and discover the senses in which he was soul of the age. Because of the power of memory and imagination, 2 of Shakespeare's greatest gifts, the mind does not obey the same rule of time as the entropic human body. In writing a life of Shakespeare's mind that looks before and after, we might just be able to escape not only the deadening march of chronological sequence that his biography's besetting vice, but also the depressingly reductive narrative that George Bernard Shaw discerned in the life when it is told in the traditional way. Everything we know about Shakespeare can be got into a half-hour sketch. He was a very civil gentleman who got round men of all classes. He was extremely susceptible to word music and to graces of speech. He picked up all sorts of odds and ends from books and from the street talk of his day and welded them into his work. And to this, that he was, like all highly intelligent and conscientious people, businesslike about money and appreciative of the value of respectability and the discomfort and discredit of bohemianism. Also that he stood on his social position and desired to have it affirmed by the grant of a coat of arms. And you have all we know of Shakespeare beyond what we gather from his plays. Gathering what we can from his plays and poems, that is how we will write a biography that is true to him. But the process has immense perils. As the critic Barbara Everett writes in an acute essay on the problem of Shakespearean life writing, if his biography is to be found, it has to be here, in the plays and poems, but never literally and never provably. That Shakespeare wrote in Sonnet 37 of being made lame by fortune's dearest spite does not necessarily mean that he had a limp, as more than one biographer has supposed. An accurate triangulation of the life, the work, and the world must be more subtle. It must look for traces of cultural DNA, little details such as a reference to Warwickshire or the knowledge of a particular school textbook, and must be prepared to make surprising connections in the style of Shakespeare's own inventive, metaphorical imagination. We must, by indirections, find directions out.